couldn't hardly buy a better car.
You'll know that everybody that sees you will either love it or hate it.
It's thirsty.
It's just a lot of fun.
Almost as good as sex, maybe even better.
It's absolutely thrilling, it's breathtaking, and it's like a disease. To say that something was the Cadillac of something meant that there was nothing better. Whether it was the Cadillac of dog food, which is a major American brand, or the finest vehicles made in the United States. Henry Leland represented the relentless pursuit of quality throughout his entire career. He had been involved with Henry Ford from the founding of the company, and they had parted ways because of a fundamental disagreement in how they viewed transportation.
And thus the Cadillac Automobile Company is launched on its career. Quickly swinging into its stride, the first product is the famous one-cylinder Model A. In 1905, the name is changed to the Cadillac Motor Car Company, and the first four-cylinder model is introduced.
Well, at that point in the motor industry, when you bought an automobile, it was much like buying a strange mechanical device in that you were divorced from the factory and from the engineers. If something broke, you were on your own. You had to figure out a way of fixing it yourself or fabricating a part. What Leland realized was that if you had standardized parts that were readily available, you would dramatically improve not only the reliability of the vehicle because of the consistent quality of parts, but also would open up the opportunity for many more people to buy cars. What Leland did was set up a challenge. He took 3 Cadillacs, stock Cadillacs, and had them shipped to the UK. They were raced around the track at Brooklands, which at that time was the most famous automotive track in the world. Then each of the 3 Cadillacs was fully disassembled, the parts were thrown into a huge bin, shaken about, and the mechanics were given the mandate to go reassemble the cars. All 3 cars were raced at the track, and it was a clear winner.
I salute this achievement. I feel honored to present the makers of Cadillac with the Dewar Trophy in recognition of what they have done in this test for the industry we represent.
There was a great period of consolidation in the automotive industry. Billy Durant came up with the notion of buying many car companies and many part suppliers and bringing them under the umbrella of one automotive manufacturer, and that became General Motors. Cadillac entered General Motors shortly thereafter in 1908. It was one of the first marques that was brought into the fold. We saw some amazing innovations coming from Leland and Cadillac.
Cranking took more muscle and moxie than most females could muster. Until Cadillac and a man named Kettering found a way to start a car electrically with the push of a button.
Theoretically, this damn thing ought to work now. And it does, too.
By 1915, Cadillac had developed an astonishing reputation in the American automobile industry, and their introduction of the first practical V8 engine was a continuation of the quality expectations that people had for the marque.
This is a 1915 Cadillac, Type 51, 7-passenger touring car. This Cadillac V8, it seemed to be a good, dependable car. It was easy to start, powerful, about 70 horsepower. This car new was about $2,300. So, you know, where the Model T and the 490 Chevys were $490, $500. Not everybody could afford one of these, but for the money, you couldn't hardly buy a better car.
Well, every time I ride in it, I just grin from ear to ear. And we wave at people, and people wave at us, because it's a bit unusual, and it's just fun to go down the road in it.
These cars are real low geared. They get up to speed real fast, decelerate real fast. The real low gear ratios are a problem in all these old cars. You don't want the thing wound out at 40, 45 miles an hour. You might want to drive 50, 55 and not have your engine screaming.
There's no heat. We've had times when we were real cold, and The floorboards warm the feet for the guy in front, but the person in back's usually the one that's cold and wind-blown the most. It's just a lot of fun. Have to dress in period clothing to fit the year of your car. So when he got the car, I started researching to get costumes made for all of us. I've made 4 outfits for myself, 1 for my daughter. I think I probably would love to have lived in that era. He says he's going to teach me to drive this car, but he hasn't yet. So.
Well, she has to understand a few principles about it, you know, before she can jump right in and start shifting gears and stuff.
But I do really well sitting in the passenger seat. And I love to get in my costume. I feel like I am stepped back into another era. It's just fun.
The 1920s represented a remarkable period of consolidation and change for the American automobile industry. Cadillac suddenly had many competitors, so that by 1927, there was a radical change in Cadillacs in 2 areas, engineering and style. Harley Earl originally had come from California, where he was doing custom coach work, and was brought to Cadillac and General Motors to create innovative automotive designs. He formed what was known as the Art and Color unit of General Motors. What Earl decided to do was come out with a companion version of the Cadillac that was smaller, a bit less expensive, but every bit as stylish, and that was the 1927 LaSalle.
Pounding across the ties, sometimes at express train speed, LaSalle makes news as Cadillac shows the world.
But Cadillac wasn't content to just rest on its laurels. Beginning in 1926, they commenced work on one of the most ambitious engineering programs in the history of the company, and that was the development of the 16-cylinder engine.
The car is a 1931 Cadillac V16. The V16 was targeted at, I hate to use this term, but the elite, the man that had everything. The average man on the street might have a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder or even an 8-cylinder. But a 16-cylinder, it's almost larger than life. It's the largest number of cylinders that were available in a production vehicle. To have 16 cylinders at your command is a thrill of a lifetime. It's not like any other experience anybody could have driving another motor vehicle. It's absolutely thrilling, it's breathtaking, and it's like a disease. Once it gets in your blood, you are a V16 person for life. The paint job is very flamboyant for the day. To be using 3 colors, a beautiful egg cream, a very, very light cocoa powder brown for the body panels, with the dark brown fenders, and the red pinstriping was almost unheard of. Very flamboyant, in an era where very few people wanted to be very flamboyant. They wanted to be known as conservative. The Cadillac V16 engine was one of the first, if not the first, engine that went through the styling department. And they wanted to hide all the wiring and all the pipes and make it look pleasing to the eye. So aesthetically, I think it's one of the best looking engines of the classic era. The car was manufactured in August of 1930 and delivered to a Pops Pryor. And Mr. Pryor was the chief engineer of Frigidaire, the company that manufactured home appliances and refrigerators. And he owned the car up until 1951. The fuel consumption was of no concern. It was poor. The average was approximately 4 miles per gallon. But you have to remember that fuel was 15 cents a gallon in 1930 and 1931. Really wasn't of much concern to the man that could afford to buy a Cadillac V16. Well, there were a series of elegant print advertising in magazines of the day that touted the car's luxury, the comfort, the styling. There are people that collect Van Gogh artwork. This is the same thing. Each one of these is an individual piece of art. And I feel that I'm a custodian for several of these pieces of art to help preserve them through history, because they will be here to be enjoyed long after I'm gone.
By 1941, Cadillac had a record year because they were able to dramatically lower prices. The LaSalle had been dropped, and they introduced the 61 series, which was a great starter for people who wanted to enter the world of Cadillac ownership. This would have continued along the same happy lines had it not been for the beginnings of World War II, when all American automotive production switched to war material. Cadillac stepped up to the plate, and they began producing famous V8 engines that were used in tanks as well as their automatic transmissions. So that after the war was over, many servicemen whose introduction to a Cadillac had been on a rampage going through Europe or in successful battles in Asia wanted to put that same power in their own home driveway. And Cadillac ownership continued to explode after a war as a result of this momentum. In 1948, Cadillac came out with a slight styling innovation. They had been inspired by the P-38 aircraft and decided to put a little tail piece on the back of the automobile, and it was known as a tail fin. It was a little bumpy thing at first, but as we'll see, it grew to astonishing proportions and captivated all of America. In the 1950s, America was enjoying the greatest prosperity of its history. In a sense, it was as if the entire nation had just won the lottery and was looking for a way to spend its money. General Motors was more than happy to accommodate the American public by helping people dream.
I dreamt last night the moon was so bright it melted the walls away. And it wasn't alarming when I saw Prince Charming come into my bedroom and say,
Let me persuade you to come to the place where tomorrow meets today.
Ooh, thank you. It sounds very exciting. May I come just as I am?
Hey, girls don't go to Motoramas dressed in a pair of pink pajamas.
Maybe they don't, but
In essence, it was like taking a P.T. Barnum show for the 1950s, putting it on wheels and setting it up in hotel ballrooms and municipal stadiums around the United States. People could come and fantasize about the great ideas and great designs that were coming out of Detroit. Harley Earl, by adding gobs and gobs of chrome, was to come out with the most unusual, innovative, and dramatic styling in the entire history of American automotive design. Or as he said, if the public wants fins, I'm going to give them fins.
This is a 1959 Eldorado Barrett's convertible. Out of, I think, 1,300 were made. This is one of the few left in the world. It was several $1,000s more than a conventional Cadillac of the period, but it was definitely the car to have. Elvis Presley, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, anybody that was anybody that wanted flash appeal had one. And whether I'm riding Frank's car or he rides in mine or whatever, it's just we like each other. That's nice, but we like our cars. We like our cars more. My father knew his father. They were friends and business associates back in the 20s. I think it was
bootleggers.
Bootleggers, okay.
Bootleggers together. What the hell? They're all gone. I've still got the still at my house. I can show you. My dad built it in 1929.
It's for display purposes only. We better comment. A man came to me I would say probably 15 years ago, before the 59s became in vogue, before they got popular and expensive. And I had 19 of them at that time. And I had a commitment to do some business, and I needed some money. So I sold him 1959 Cadillacs all at one time, several of them convertibles, no Eldorados, only to find out that son of a...
Listen to this.
He took them to Florida, cut them up, and made into...
Davenports,
and had a restaurant and made them into, what do you call those, booths, and made one into... In fact, I went down to his restaurant years later and ate in the back of my convertible in a booth. It just made me sick to have that happen to him. It was the first Cadillac I remember riding in as a child. I remember driving down the street with my father and him thinking that the trunk might be open or a truck was too near, because you could just see the fin out of the corner of your eye. They are a pleasure, almost as good as sex, or depending who you're talking to, maybe even better. Nothing else looks like it. When you see a 59 Cadillac go down the road, you don't mistake it for anything other than maybe the Batmobile.
By the 1960s, the Cadillac had been stripped of all of its finny excess and were basically long, beautiful boxes that were well appointed, very solid, very powerful, and very, very thirsty. You also saw the addition of many other power conveniences. There wasn't a single thing a driver had to do by that period other than point the car in the right direction, put the gear shift selector in D, and go. But that came at a big price, and the price was Cadillac leadership. By about 1973, in the appearance of the first U.S. oil crisis, the Cadillac really was looked upon as a dinosaur, and Cadillac reacted by producing even more lavish and more elaborate cars, resulting in the 1976 Fleetwood, by far the ultimate exposition of the grand sedan that we think of today as a Cadillac.
This car is a 1976 Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham. It's the last large car that was made. It's kind of the last hurrah to the big chassis of those years. It was known for its power, gas guzzling in those years, which of course was a hot topic due to the gas crisis in 1974. Gas prices were in the range of 39 to 42 cents in the early 70s to mid 70s, and shifted to like almost $2 a gallon overnight, and people were like, and it threw them into mass hysteria. And there were long gas lines and gas shortages because of the oil embargo from the Mideast at that point. And people immediately shifted their need or want to a smaller car and did not want to buy the big cars anymore at that point. The 1976 Cadillac is a 233-inch length car. It weighs over 5,200 pounds, and it drinks quite a bit of gasoline, although not as bad as most people would think. It does get 15.2 miles to the gallon on the highway. It's thirsty, I guess is a good way of putting it. But the people who did buy it, really, it didn't matter to them. They had worked, many of them had worked all their lives, like my grandparents, and wanted a big car. They had always dreamed of having a big car, so they went ahead and bought one anyway. In 1974, when the gas crisis happened, my grandfather went out and bought this little stripped-down Vega, Chevrolet Vega, that was red with a black interior. And he pulled my grandmother out of the house to look at it and said, "Look what I'm going to do. We're going to drive this around town." And she goes, "Sonny, didn't work all my years of my life to run around in this thing." And the next day they went to get out to go to the store, and my grandmother got in the Cadillac and my grandfather got in the Vega, and they both went to the store together, using more gas by driving two cars than they would if they had just driven the Cadillac. This went on for some time, and eventually the Vega ended up in my father's driveway instead of my grandparents'. The rear bumper and all the tail lights, every red piece in the 76 Cadillac lights up. So it's kind of like a show of lights on the rear end at night. That's something that I just thought was really neat in the car. Beyond that are the comfort, the sheer comfort of the car. You get it out on the highway at 80 miles an hour and it just sets right on the road, and you don't worry about it. You can literally set the cruise control on, sit back, relax, and enjoy your ride. And it's not just that you have to really maneuver or drive the car, it just goes. It's kind of fun.
After 1976, Cadillac changed direction and introduced their first downsized series of cars. The other problem that Cadillac faced in that period was that their audience was aging. Cadillac wasn't capturing the core market of successful young people, which BMW and Mercedes was so successfully launching into. General Motors needed to do something dramatic, and they needed to do it quickly. And the result was the North Star engine project. It was the creation of one of the most incredible engines in automotive history, certainly in Cadillac's history, and has been a staple of Cadillac design since up to the present.
I think the fascination of Cadillac is the mystique that it's carried over the years of being the prize for being successful. I think that is its number one, and most Cadillac owners deep down may not tell you that, but that's the truth.
What's astonishing about this marque is the change. It's nearly a century old, and we've seen changes from a one-cylinder car to a 16, to high-performance 8s, and a variety of body styles that would have been unthinkable at the turn of the century.
I like almost all Cadillacs. It's a weakness. If you gave me a choice of bypass surgery, which Frank had last year, and he's alive today due to it, but if you told me I could have a 59 Cadillac, Eldorado convertible, or bypass surgery, and I had to make the decision at that moment, I'm not sure which decision I would make. I want to be alive, but I think driving a 59 might give me enough pleasure that I'm ready to die.
Well, I've talked to getting a Cadillac tattooed on me. Getting a Cadillac emblem tattooed on my forearm. I haven't gone that far yet, but you never can tell.